So my name is Dr. Henry Harder. I'm a professor in the School of Health Sciences here at the University of Northern British Columbia. I'm a clinical psychologist by training way back, and I'm a member of both the health sciences and the psychology departments here on campus. I'm also the Dr. Donald B. Ricks BC Aboriginal Environmental Health Research Chair. It's quite a mouthful, but I focus on doing work with Indigenous communities primarily, surrounding two areas. One is the whole area of mental health generally, and the other is environmental issues. And I'm particularly interested in how the two fit together and how people live with repeated exposure to resource development and extraction. So I've been in this area for about 17 years now, and have worked with many students. I myself am Indigenous from my father's side. My father was from this part of the world, from the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan area of BC, and my mother was Russian Mennonite from out of the Ukraine, and who came to Canada as an immigrant. So I've lived on both sides of that equation, and it's an interesting kind of mix to have at times. So it's been a privilege to work here in Prince George with on the Clay Lake Tenay territory. I have worked almost exclusively over my career here with a group called Carrier Secondary Family Services, who represent 11 carrier communities containing about 18 different bands according to the Indian Act. So I have extensive exposure in this area, which stretches about to almost to Hazelton out in that direction. So quite a large geographic area with quite a few people involved. And I'm particularly interested in working with psychology and psychology students. I've had a number of those, and trying to figure out how to make psychology work for Indigenous people, which it generally speaking does not do. So we are currently working on developing new epistemologies as one area to help Indigenous people interact with psychology on many fronts, and to encourage students in particular to pursue careers in psychology. Of course, that requires students to succeed first of all at a high school and undergrad degree, and I have been passionate for years to work with Indigenous students both in their own communities and here to help them succeed at university, and to then draw them into the field of psychology as well. It's a long road to get into psych, so people need encouragement and support as they go along the way. With regards to research, I work with a number of teams. I work exclusively in community, which means that I work on reserve and with people on reserve, and spend my time in communities across the north. And I have a really good partner in Carrier Secondary Family Services that has stood me in really good stead over the years, and we've worked very closely together and continue to do so. I also work on campus with colleagues, particularly in the environmental area, and a lot of partnerships and cross-fertilization there, looking at what the environmental impact is, for example, on pipeline development, forestry, mining, other kinds of resource extraction activities. And we currently have a project that goes across Canada, including into New Brunswick. So we have a team from New Brunswick that is working with us on various kinds of activities in that area, particularly in that case with children and what the impact of resource extraction is on children. So very interesting. We're about a year and a half or so into that project and starting to get some idea of what's going on there. In terms of what my most memorable experience was, I think that was recently. I was in Hazelton with the Gitxsan, and we had a little community meeting in the old school, which is now Gitxsan Governance run, and having a meeting in there. And we're sitting up, and one of the fellows who was setting up chairs came out to talk to me and said, where are you from? And I explained to him. And he says, well, you're from UNBC. And he came up and he gave me this giant hug, lifted me right off the floor, and said, I gotta thank you for the wonderful job you guys have done with my son. So it was a real thrill to see the connection there, and he was so happy because his son had just recently graduated with a bachelor's degree, and the whole family was thrilled by that. Now, I personally had nothing to do with his son graduating, but it was a cool community connection, and it's something that I've taken strength with regards to continuing this work. What I wished I'd known earlier in my career, I don't know. That this is supposed to be positive, right? So it's difficult. It's hard to work in community. It's hard to work with Indigenous people because of all of the disadvantages that these communities have faced. And a colleague of mine recently said that being Indigenous and going to university do not mix, they're incompatible. And it made me think quite a bit about how hard it is for people to leave their communities and come to, in our case, the big city, which is Prince George, which is a pretty small community compared to going to a UBC or an SFU, for example, and how hard the young people find that. And to me, that really speaks to the importance of what we're trying to do here through the mentorship program to figure out how to help students succeed both in that transition, so emotionally and psychologically and all of those factors, but also academically as well. So it's a difficult thing to do. In terms of my well-being, this is a difficult one because you can lose your way very easily. But for about the last 2 years, I've been working with a Mohawk Cree elder around spiritual practices and spending time with him. And one of the things I've been doing virtually every day is a sunrise ceremony, focusing on the Creator and on positive thoughts and those kinds of things as part of the sunrise ceremony. And I found that to be a really strong way for me to focus and to stay focused, positive, and to look at the world in a very different way. So I'd say that's my number one initiative around that. And that's that for me.